Here we are, we're about to drop the body on this Gen 5 Terremoto build. This is a 6.2 L86. We've got our MoTech power steering bracket on it. These wires right here are for the Atlas that plugs into the TIPM. That controls the four-wheel drive modes. Got a Rubicon sway bar disconnect connector here. We'll have to deal with that. That's your C300 chassis connector, which will be plugged in when we drop the body. We swapped all the brake lines over, ABS module, HCU, hydraulic control unit. We've got a PSC steering gear, Dana 70s from Currie, King shocks, coilovers. We got an Atlas 3-to-1 A2. Now this is the first 8-speed adapter for an Atlas that has been built. We work with Advance on that. We are running our heavy-duty four-wheel drive dual stud transmission mount. We did have to section the frame to drop the transfer case down, and we have got the transfer case about a ½ inch off the skid plate, and we also have clearance to the floor. We did have to massage the floor a little bit. We've got our output lined up with the rear hoop, which is lined up with the rear axle, and the rear axle is not offset, it's pretty much in the center, which you almost have to do with a 4-link setup. So the drive shaft will not run true with the factory cross member, but it will run true with this aftermarket cross member. We have our Evap Canister mounted here above the skid plate. We're going to run full emissions on this build, catalytic converters, so it's going to make the exhaust a little tight with this 3-link because we've got to get the exhaust and the drive shaft through. We're running an Evap vent solenoid and fuel tank pressure sensor, and of course purge valve. We're running the fuel line through the frame rail, and we're using mostly nylon line, and nylon line is actually very durable and it doesn't break or crack like steel line does, but you have to route it properly and keep it away from heat, because heat or sunlight will kill nylon, the fuel lines. Got our Genright, I think it's a 25-gallon tank. Essentially what we do on these tanks, or what Tony does on these tanks, is they lower the stock fuel pump down to the bottom of the sump, and that then allows the pickup to pull fuel off the bottom of the tank. I'm not going to say it's a problem, but one of the design considerations in this tank is because it is a dual hump, the float cannot go all the way to the top. A while back I actually built a bob setup where I did measure top to bottom, but essentially this is going to be accurate from about half tank to empty, which is what really matters. But when you fill it up, it's going to read full for quite a while because the bob on the sending unit can't go all the way to the top of the tank. This is going to be a street-driven JK, unlike Terremoto. We've plumbed all the brake lines for Genright to now go in and route them along the control arms. They're going to run some special, I think they're stainless, I don't know, they've got their own setup for the brake lines, so it's ready for them. We've swapped the chassis harness over for our fuel pump, ABS and all that, and the body's going to be dropped here soon. We've got a few more parts to add. The transmission dipstick tube, a couple other small items. Let me show you a couple of interesting things. These Gen 5 motors, since they have enhanced air fuel management or 4-cylinder mode, run a vacuum pump. That extra pulley there is actually a vacuum pump that puts out strong vacuum even at low RPM, so if you're crawling, that's an advantage. This new design water pump allows you to replace just the pump. You can see those bolts behind the pulley, so you don't have to replace the whole pump housing anymore. this alternator on the Gen 5 is computer controlled, and it will be with this swap, and it runs a one-way clutch bearing for reduced friction. This is a JK power steering pump, but it's going to be changed out to a PSC, either in California or here, I'm not sure. We're just using this to get it running, and then when we get the PSC pump, it will fit our bracket. That is a Gen 5 air compressor, and you can see how much room we have to the frame. Lots of room for the lines and the compressor itself. We are running Gen 5 hydraulic motor mounts, which are relatively large cans compared to the Gen 4. You can see the valve cover design on this engine is significantly different than the earlier LS's, because we now have the injectors inside there for the direct injection. Look over here. Well, it's not installed, but the vacuum pump has a fitting that goes over to the brake booster, and it uses a brake booster pressure sensor. This is the new style O2 sensor connector. We have different tranny cooler lines on the 8L90, 8L80 over the earlier 6L80. These manifolds pretty much fit perfect on the Gen 5s. No modifications. I really like running stock manifolds. They are quiet, they run cooler than headers, and these manifolds can flow up to about 500 horsepower. So if you're under 500 horsepower, think about getting these manifolds. That's about it. Probably the next video you're going to see is going to be with the body on, and then we'll do a follow-up video at that point.